Okay, so I still am deeply immersed into the Iliad of Homer, right? Because if I do my siesta here in
Mm.
Mallorca. So, and I was thinking there are some themes in that book that still are relevant today in a sort of strange way, right? And so you have Helena, which is the most beautiful girl of all, and
Hmm.
and she tries to escape her husband, Menelaus, right? And she does that by way of being kidnapped by her lover, which is Paris, right? So that's the
Yeah.
story. That sets all the things into motion.
She was
But
intentionally kidnapped.
yes, and so it's like she's intentionally kidnapped, and so like every beautiful girl, oh, I'm create a complete mess, and I don't know what's going on. But the
Can I
point,
say a
and
really sexist thing before you continue?
yes, of
Every
course,
beautiful woman wants to be kidnapped.
yeah.
Right?
Okay, so but there's a
Yeah.
theme there. It's called emancipation, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, okay, so we have feminism now, but maybe what if that what we're experiencing today as feminism, that
Hmm.
the trope or the underlying structure is it's way deeper. It's a constant struggle for emancipation that started right at the beginning of Western civilization. So because if you read Shakespeare, if you read Ibsen, if you read mostly anybody, even if you go back to the Iliad, it's always about the emancipation of women. And it's
Mm.
not particularly a novel thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's a basic trope of Western society. And the argument I'm trying to put forth is that what if there's a dialectic going on between men and women in our Western culture? So let's say,
What if there is?
so men are kind of pushing the boundaries, right? And then women say, okay, we want the same rights. So imagine you have kings and you have the medieval ages, and
Mhm.
then at the beginning of the 17th, 18th century, men have mostly the idea that they want democracy and rights, right? And they
Yeah.
get the voting rights. And then 50 years later, women come and, oh, we want these rights too. But before, nobody had these rights. And so the norms of what is acceptable, they're constantly shifting. And so and this is like a kind of dialectic. So men go to the barricades, men fight and do all these kind of things, and then women say, oh no, it's like we need this too. And so there's this constant theme and trope
Me
of,
too. In other words.
well, yeah. And so there's like this constant theme and trope of emancipation in literature. So in the sense, feminism as it started in the 60s, it's not really new. The iteration was new because men had shifted, but we're like fed up with war and all of these kind of things, and pluralism started. But the trope itself is way older.
Well, you could go even deeper than that, and you could say that our entire evolution moves towards the feminine in some sense. And I don't want to say that in sort of like a pagan kind of way or whatever, like the Great Mother or whatever. It's that civilization, the male advances to clear the path for the feminine. The male advances to clear the path for the feminine. The
Right,
male advances to clear the path for the feminine. Because the
right.
feminine is everything. The feminine is embodiment. The feminine is the whole world. The feminine is Malchus. The feminine is everything. And
Yeah,
the masculine is sort of like clearing the path for the feminine. There's an erotic version of that.
right.
And then there's a heroic version of that. The neurotic version of that is like, okay, like men demasculating themselves, or castration cults, or something like that. Like in Crete, in Crete, there were castration cults apparently. There was a matriarchal society, and all the men had their testicles cut off. I read this in Eric Neumann's book
Yeah,
on consciousness. So we don't want to go back to this like pagan feminine, but actually Shekinah, the Holy Spirit in Judaism is feminine. It's not masculine, which makes sense to me. And that all these men just reading the Torah by themselves, that's not the whole version of the world. The whole version of the world, the real version of the world happens when the feminine it comes in or arrives next to the masculine, something like that.
I don't know if I completely understand what you mean with, it moves into the feminine. I get what you say when you say clears the path for the feminine, because if you take a very macro view on history, right? And so it's like, so yeah, of course, men started being careerist when industrialization started, and then moved into science, and then women came in and occupied that space later. So you see, there's always like this kind of, dialectic that the man occupies a new space, and then the woman comes in and inhabits it too, and then there's like a push pull kind of thing. So then men are kind of pushed again in the heroic, like in the chaotic, to create something new. Like, let's, for example, the podcast space. It started with Joe Rogan and Red Band and this other guy, and now women come into these podcasting kind of sphere, and so there's always like this kind of dialectic and
yeah.
But the point is, I think maybe it's a Western trope in itself.
Why Western?
Yeah, because I can only talk about Western because I'm Western, right? So I don't know how that plays out in China, let's say. But I can say in the West, it seems to me that if you look at literature, emancipation was always the point. And you see that also because like I was editing, one last point, because I really found that interesting. So I was editing a book, and the author had a real, negative view on men. But I was like, is that there? If you read the literature, there's never like a overarching story where the climax and the resolution of the story is the subjugation of woman. That never happens. If patriarchy and if men were bad and creating the stories, then the stories they were writing about were like stories about the subjugation of women. And the climax and solution would be, we put him down again. Yes, we did it. We finally, they are our slaves again. But that never happened in literature. It is always the opposite. It is always the emancipation of the woman. And that's the interesting thing.
Yeah, that is interesting. And when I say we move into the feminine, right, I don't mean we all become feminized, and some kind of like, and the masculine just becomes irrelevant. What I kind of mean is, I don't know if you know the martial artist who invented Aikido, what his name was.
No, go ahead.
I forget his name, but he was a great martial artist, and he invented Aikido. And when he was a young guy, he was this big muscular dude, right? He had huge powerful beast of a man, right?
Yeah.
And when he became old, when he became a Aikido master, he developed this kind of fluidity, and this was like and his body became very, just like water, and that's the sort of, this is the journey that I was kind of speaking about. It wasn't, and it's not that he lost any of his manhood, the contrary, but he was able to go fully with his manhood into the feminine, let's say, and into the fluid quality of existence. And I think civilization moves that way, in a way. Like, we have to stay strong and masculine, but we also have to become more fluid, and without going into this like fragmented state of gender dysphoria, remaining in the masculine but also developing fluidity.
I understand what you're saying. So do you say that they can become more feminine because not only they are getting in contact with, let's say, their anima in that specific area, but also because women are inhabiting that space and they can get, because of that, in contact with their anima in the first place. Because if you're only with men in a certain area, right, and then you drift into kind of an over masculinity, you need the feminine in that space to access your anima and all of that. You do mean
Yeah, it
that?
becomes a sausage party, as you were saying. Like, I remember reading Marie-Louise von France, and she talked about the
Yeah.
difference between Mediterranean culture and, let's say, Germanic culture. In Germanic culture, all these men kind of like hang out together, and they're kind of afraid of women, right? They're very macho in the north, but they don't know how to relate to women as well.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Mediterranean cultures, it's like the men are still kind of macho, but they love women, and they're like, this is a woman, wow, and there's a woman, so they're aware of women in a way. They're not so polarized into hyper masculinity versus hyper femininity, right? They've retained their masculinity, but they know what a mother is, and it's a big deal. Like there could be a neurotic version of that as well, but they tend to worship the feminine in some kind of a way, whereas in the north, and German guys just are sort of like super masculine kind of. They haven't related to their animus at all. They're still in a pagan kind of pagan state. I wonder if it has something to do with Christianity in some kind of way, because the northern. The southern countries had Judeo-Christian culture and Hellenic culture for centuries before the German did. So they never got to know their anima.
I'm not entirely sure, Andrew, because I'm living here in Spain for 11 years now, and that, I mean, it's just Spain, but I feel there's an inauthentic kind of way of dealing with gender roles that is, surpassed, in great length by the northern way of approaching these kinds of topics, because it's like this. It's a very inauthentic masculinity and femininity. No, it's like they look the part, So that's over masculine and like fitness dudes with the chiseled chin, and it's like but they're still at 30, still living at home, 35. So that's like they're not really masculine.
Well, that's the thing, is those muscly guys aren't masculine. They're completely feminized because they're obsessed with the body.
Right.
That's the feminine.
Right.
They're completely controlled by the image of the feminine.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a more advanced masculinity is more like emptiness, right?
Yeah.
It's more like it can handle the feminine, but it also doesn't need to present itself.
Yeah.
Like a peacock.
But let me go back, because there was one additional point that I wanted to express, because so Nietzsche talked about the recurrence of the same. Right. Mm-hmm. And so he was like very much in the tradition of Schopenhauer. And Schopenhauer said Schopenhauer wasn't really a nihilist. I mean, sort of, but, in a different way that we commonly understand. But the point is that also Schopenhauer said there's nothing new that's happening. And so he was like also like trying to express this idea that everything repeats itself in a sort of way. And that all that we are like preoccupied with now, and these forms of feminism, that's just a cognitive surplus, an excess of thought of something that's always there. Well,
that's a great thought. I really like that thought. That's an amazing thought. I think there's something very true about that. That is sort of, because you see the cultures that are the most repressed or narrow are always the ones that sort of have to hide the feminine in some kind of a way, right? They have to veil the feminine. They have to keep the feminine locked away somewhere hidden.
You mean other cultures than the West, or what you mean?
Yeah. Like, well, just like totalitarian types of cultures they just have to ignore and deny the messiness and beauty and the expressiveness of the feminine.
Yeah.
And that's why they put women in veils, and whereas the more the culture becomes sophisticated and advanced and alive in a way, the more the feminine is able to express itself. And so that is the sort of
exactly.
the journey. There is an evolutionary journey there on some level. Maybe it's the same, but it is this, and that is, as you say, the beginning of literature. It's exactly right. It's like that literature is a movement towards that. I don't know if you know, like in the last paragraph of Ulysses, there's this scene of Molly Bloom's soliloquy. She's just sort of this like, she just expresses this feminine sexuality in its most, overt and explosive kind of way. And the more we can move towards that, the more civilized the culture becomes.
Yeah, and
as long as it doesn't become a sort of a castration cult, as long as it doesn't become, and that's the excessive neurotic side of the culture today, is that this is happening. It's a beautiful thing, but it can become a cancel culture in castration.
But that's not
denial of
that's not what I mean.
and, mm-hmm.
That's not. I don't know if that's not. What I mean is, if you look at the Iliad, there's like, how do I express that? So there are gods, and there are female gods, and they are not weak. The female gods are very strong, and if women were, if men were superior than women at that point of time, the image of the female gods also would be like inferior, but they aren't. If we understand gods as something that is like a perfect rendering of a human being, right? Mm-hmm. Like a god. So why would the Iliad show so strong female gods? That wouldn't make sense.
Right. Well, because women have always been as powerful as men, and
that's what I'm saying.
In the Hindu culture, they're more powerful. And
that's what I'm saying. And so this is a book that is like, it's like, it's still widely read today. Why is that? Why is that such a classic? Why is that such an important book? It's older than the Bible because it speaks to something true. And I don't know what it is. If it's our collective unconscious, if it's my unconscious, it's like it speaks to us in a very profound way because it divulges some truth about us. And the truth may be that it's always a dialectic. It's always an interplay between male and female. It's always about the heroic entering of the unknown and the female that inhabits that space too. Emancipation. And that's what I try to express. That's always, Yeah.
Well, about female emancipation, it's not done by women. But it sounds very sexist, right, to say that. But it's done by men and women. And a lot of the times it's the men that invented birth control and household appliances and things like this that allowed the women to be much more free, and because the men were more engineers, and so it's not like a bunch of women just decided, just fought against the men and got freedom. That's kind of a silly narrative that we have in our culture. I think because I think that so many men are behind the project of female emancipation.
Yeah.
And in fact, that is the project. Is it's almost like it's an erotic project. Literally, right? Is what we want to do is emancipate women.
I mean, even
their clothing. No, just kidding.
Even in the Bible, I'm just remembering. There's the story. Is a name. It's not Jezebel. It's some other name. It's about basically a prostitute.
Lilith.
No, I don't know if it's Lilith, but it's a story about a prostitute that kind of in that story kind of helps two spies from Israel to hide, and so she takes them in the home and helps them. But so she's clearly breaking the law by harboring these spies and helping them. So that's not a weak woman. And there's so much to learn from that, because in that story, and so you have to understand that there's an archetype of the woman as a whore. Lilith, as you say, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the woman that is able to love everyone.
Yeah.
let everyone to enter her in a kind of way. And it's like, if you so if you talk about, you know, the Mariah archetype, that's clearly there's a tension there, right? But in the Bible, there and that's what Eric Neumann told you about, wrote about. There are different female archetypes, and they're all strong. You know, they're not victims. That's what I want to express.
Oh no. Well, it's interesting. Like I was listening to Fanny talk at the Utah, and she was saying that this is kind of a male thing to think of Madonna and whore, right?
Right.
So either the woman is a Madonna, right, is a virtuous mother, or she's a whore. It's like this kind of is like, it's a denigration of female sexuality, which is just sexuality. It's not Madonna or whore.
Yeah.
But there's something beautiful about the, say, like the temple prostitute, this kind of compassionate thing, right? And also, if you look at and also in the Hebrew Bible, it's the women that are doing all the heroic things in the beginning, and then the men come after. So we were saying the men go out and do this, but actually the women are the ones that are protecting the Jewish children and the midwives and that kind of thing. There's a heroic thing going on both sides, very of a different quality perhaps, but yeah, of course they're not. The female archetypes are not weak, you know. Female. I think they say in Hindu that Hindu tradition that women are like 1,000 times stronger than men. That's going the other extreme.
No, I must say that I'm not that I'm talking about an abstract level here. I'm not talking about prostitution as it is handled in our society today. You know.
Yes.
So
no, I understood that. Yeah.
But what I did was, it's years back. I had a podcast with a woman that wrote a very famous and very good book about her experience as a high class prostitute. And because she was also, you know, she was like, she was acknowledging that there are a lot of victims, but in her case, she was very interested in to see what that is all about. And so, and that book, it's a fascinating book because how she describes the interaction with men, and especially 2 or 3 things like inhabited my mind after that, you know. And first, she said that every man she encountered and slept with wanted at some point of the interaction a genuine connection with a woman. It was more about the emotional connection than about the sexual friction.
About the section, yeah.
And in that sense, she said, I was way more a therapist than anything else. And she understood that, you know, and that was very interesting.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Yeah. And there's so many things to talk about there. You know, somebody was saying, I forget who it was, that what men really want is intimacy.
Right.
You know, more than anything. And we believe that what men really want is sex. And that's, women kind of believe that about men. They're just after sex. But often, yes, we like sex, but we're often looking for intimacy.
Exactly.
And also, it's the opposite for women. Women, we think, are looking for intimacy, but often they really need, you know,
spanking.
They really need a spank. No, and often women are often looking, you know, to be opened up sexually because it's more difficult for some women than men, right? Who just can very easily perform the act.
Yeah.
So
it was super interesting because that book was like a view into the underbelly of this high escort kind of thing in Berlin, right?
Yeah.
And so how that worked, you know, behind the curtain. And so she could choose her lovers, let's say, but it was always, you know, this kind of these people wanted to talk and to have a connection, and I found it very interesting, you know, that is you know, that this exists too. It's not only ugly.
Yeah, you know, Jordan Peterson was telling a story on a podcast I was listening recently about a woman who was raped. Actually, she wasn't raped. She was being driven by this guy, and he took her out into the desert,
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm going to rape you because I've been abused, but or something, and I'm going to rape you." And then he took her out into the desert, and then she looked at him and she said she loved him, and he didn't rape her because somehow it's like I mean, this is kind of a funny story, but somehow he got the therapy he needed because he had become a rapist just because out of sort of revenge because he just they felt that he was unloved by the universe, and that she just had to cutting through that like, so as you that sort of reminded me of the story you're telling me, that these prostitutes are therapists in a way that allow men to experience intimacy, because men who don't experience intimacy become completely fucked up, right? And become rapists, incel, whatever. They go crazy, right? If they can't, if they can't feel intimacy. So.
Oh, that's, wow. Okay. Yeah. It's like the introduction to that book. It's also very interesting because she describes Elan Stefani. That's her name.
Mm-hmm.
And so she describes that she is in the university and she's like somewhat interested in that scene. And so she goes to like one organization that, makes like these open evenings, these info evenings, right? And where she could talk with some prostitutes about their life experience. And so she was entering, the room where all, where it's supposed to happen. And there were like lots of women having like tea and whatever, and talking about the family and talking about the kids, and so she was waiting, and it was supposed to start at 7 or 8 or whatever, and a half an hour later, so nothing happened, and she walked to the organizing person and said, okay, so when does the event going to start? Like, where are all the prostitutes? When are they coming in? And so the organizer was saying, girl, these are all prostitutes here, right? And so there was like completely normal women that kind of had their life and their kids while doing this profession. And so she was so interested that she wanted to try that. It's a fascinating book. It's a good book.
Maybe she was she interviewed at Rebel Wisdom at one point?
I don't know. I did an interview like 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
4 years ago. I think I remember maybe hearing her talk about that.
Yeah.
But it is, in many cultures, the prostitute, there's something sacred about the prostitute, right?
Yeah.
I think we just commodified everything in the capitalist culture, so it's hard for people to relate to that. But I wonder if in a more enlightened culture that the prostitute, there would be a prostitute and the therapist,
Yeah.
could be the same person. Who knows?
What I find interesting, that it's like we all independently of men and women and gender roles and whatever, we all have to find something that is true within ourselves, and live according to that. And the more we do that, the more it's like my feeling, the more we are in accordance with the world. And it's like, and if we look at Eric Neumann, so he said there are like 5 female archetypes, no? So he talks about Lilith, the woman that hunts your dreams in a kind of way. Then you have the prostitute, then you have the big mother, then you have Maria, and then you have I always seem to forget the
Virgin?
No, yeah, the Virgin, maybe, yes. Isn't that Maria? Virgin Maria?
Oh yeah, the Virgin Mary. Yeah, there'd be the Virgin.
And so,
Mary,
and then you have like the
Madonna,
the Queen with the sword or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But these are in their sense, they're all like strong. They're different, but they're strong if you can embody them, right? And yes. I feel like that's the emancipation of women. It's like we men have to live according to our archetypes as well. And this is also like a constant struggle. But I feel like for women, it's like, yeah, it's this constant reoccurring theme that they get into a new environment, a new world and have to find themselves again and again, like, because we as men have to do this too. And so
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We have to find. So it's a question of aligning with our archetypal nature,
right.
more than becoming something, even, because I think we have a kind of an idea. Oh, we have to become something, right? We have to invent ourselves, or we have to create ourselves, or this is a sort of fallacy. Whereas it's more of a question of revelation, of revealing who you are, and revealing, removing the obstacles and the veils to who we are, right?
This is super interesting what you say. There's one thing, let me see if you know that one. The vitriol, no?
Vitriol?
Vitriol, the vitriol is an acronym which refers to the famous alchemical motto, Vista interiora terrae, rectificando in venies occultum lapidem, meaning visit the interior parts of the earth, by rectification, thou shalt find the hidden stone. But rectification means to align something. That's what you just said. It's like you have to go deep and to realign yourself. It's not really about evolving. It's something you go deep and find a new alignment within yourself, because that means rectificando, to rectify, to align properly.
Yeah, and I find that over and over as like you want something, right? And then you go searching for it outside yourself. You want to, and then you realize that no, that's not the way to do it. What the way to do it is to do nothing, to meditate, and then sit and meditate for a while, and then the clear course of action will reveal itself. Well, there'll be a rectification. Right. That's what we should do, rather than, okay, let's figure this out. In some kind of a contrived manner, or it could be anything. It could be the most banal things. It could be when you need money. Okay, we have to figure out how to get money, and then you go out and try to get money somehow, right? And you just do all these stupid things. Whereas, okay, you just have to align and figure out what are your own resources here, and without greedily grasping at something, then the resources start to make themselves apparent to you.
Yeah.
In a way. So I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, coming back, it's like, this is like the eternal game that we're playing. It's like, it's nothing new. It's like we have to realign ourselves with our masculine, or if you're a woman, like a feminine kind of archetype, or whatever you want to call it. And this idea that's an eternal cycle.
And you also have to destroy the image of the archetype, so it doesn't become an idol. So you have to dissolve whatever the archetype is as well. So there's this creative process of aligning yourself with some sort of pattern, and then there's also a process of, like, I don't know, what you would call it in alchemy, of the burning away of that image, or the I don't know, the Jude, they have the golem, right, is the image, or the false image of the thing, so that an archetype could become some sort of a prison, sort of a model, too much of a Kantian, or maybe more like a Platonic model, but it's not that. It's this dynamic process that is coming and going and being and coming out of itself, and then needs to be dissolved.
Exactly.
Just so we don't get stuck in a too reified and strict a narrative system. So there's the emptiness and form. There's not just the form.
But it's the woman who does that. Because if a man gets too stuck into a role, and that is like, these are the beautiful moments if you're in a relationship with a woman.
Yeah.
That she, and only she has like the kind of thought that cuts through your bullshit in a kind of way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like your boys, they could never do it like that deep, but a woman in a relationship has always, and that's what, when the interplay between these archetypes really come into fruition, that, if a woman is enacting a certain pattern of behavior or archetype, then she will cut through, this fixed structure, and pushes you out into the, it's like, do something new. So and
do something
new, because like I always
worthy. You have to become worthy of whatever her gift is to you.
I always felt that a woman makes me stronger, because she pushes in a way, and that's not truthful.
And she destroys you as well.
At least that's what I mean.
Often in the first relationships you have are often really destructive. I don't know, most people, I think, when they first have a relationship, because the man hasn't become strong enough to contain that dynamic energy yet.
Right.
Or either to say no to it or to say yes to it. He just gets kind of sucked in, swallowed up by the feminine, but he can't navigate those more like intuitive stormy waters. So either he gets aggressive or he gets cold. He goes into intellectuality, right? He goes just into pure conceptuality, because he can, intellectuals can do that. They go into pure conceptuality to escape the feminine completely. They become just like professors, right? They just live in this conceptual realm, and then or they become like just like macho warriors, and they just fight, and they but both of that is a denial or an escape from the feminine, so to speak.
Let me ask you a question, Andrew. Is there a structural difference between the emancipation of woman and a woman cutting through the bullshit of a man?
Is there a structural difference?
Is there a difference between those two things?
Like, well, I think the emancipated woman has to cut through the bullshit of the man, has to say no to the man, for sure.
That's what I mean. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe if a man, maybe when the structure gets too solid of the man, when he doesn't embody the archetype anymore, but it's like it's a fixed, rigid structure, and then the woman is kind of cutting through that, It's like,
well, he can become
that's
and boyish, right?
Maybe that's the emancipatory movement that woman is always kind of confronted with. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what happens. That's exactly what happens if you look at society. There are these fixed structures and gender roles, and then women come in. No, it's just like be open, like do something new.
Well, maybe it's something like the woman has to deny the man until the man becomes the man. So the woman just keeps denying the man until the man becomes the man, and then she accepts him. But if she accepts him before he's a man, then she's then she's imprisoned by him. She becomes sort of domestic, right? Whereas if she can say no to the man until he's really worthy of her, then there's a dynamic and powerful union, instead of just a codependent, erotic, often is the case in many marriages. It's like the man just they just give up on each other and kind of like watch TV together.
You remember the tower from the Tarot? When we talked about that? So when the man becomes the tower, that fixed structure, then he will fall. But then I think you told me about this, Jodorowsky, when he says, okay, there has to emerge something new, right? That's the trumpet. And that's, the active and alive masculinity in that sort of sense. And that is what the woman seeks, not this fixed structure in a kind of way. And the emancipatory act from the woman is like, listen to...
So the top of the tower explodes, and and then there's a revelation. You could see that as a negative things like the Tower of Babel and all that. But Jodorowsky sees that as like the lightning flash, of truth bursting away the reified structures and allowed for something new to happen. And the two people who are falling in that cart are dancing, or they're on their hands and feet, or they're kind of like, you could say they're bowing to the earth or something as well.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we solved it. We solved the problem between men and women, Andrew.
Yes, we solved the problem between between man in quotation marks.
Yeah.
As Gurdjieff was always saying, man in quotation marks.
I mean, because it's like we have a very fascinating guest coming in next. I won't say who it is, but fascinating guest for the next Parallax View, and because he talks a lot about excess and absence, and I want to go a little bit deeper into this. But this idea that maybe we are way too preoccupied with our meaning-making apparatus. It's like, oh, feminism is a new thing, and no, it's not. Maybe maybe there are like underlying structures that are always kind of there, and we always have to contend with this. And because we are like so preoccupied with all that information, we don't see what's really going on. It's like like on a psychological and sociological level. And it's like there's just excess of information, that obfuscates a real view on things.
Or that we're just looking forward, right? We're just kind of like going forward and thinking that everything is like a path towards the promised land. Whereas we have to develop this like eyes in the back of our head too, to see like the past and the future simultaneously happening.
Yeah.
Rather than this linear progress towards some ultimate thing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we believe that, okay, it was like this in the past, and it's going, and then so there is an emancipation process going on. At the same time, nothing new under the sun. I think both those things are true.
Yeah.